Ehi. Massimo, ti parlo io quando ti sento senza problemi. Sì.
Ehi, sì.
Eccoti. Ah no, sei mancio. Dicevo che era la traduzione. Stavo aspettando che mi...
Adesso la traduzione. Adesso la traduzione. Io vi sento e sto parlando nel canale dell'inglese. Bene, adesso chiaramente io sento il conference, il giro c'è tutto.
Grazie mancio, a posto.
In realtà avrei bisogno di sentire, di allungare un attimo la prova, perché devo passare in tutte le console, o almeno in alcune, quelle principali. Mi sentite? Sì, esatto, e devo parlare anche io nell'inglese. Sì, praticamente ci metto 30 secondi, però devo passarle tutte. E io contemporaneamente devo continuare a parlare.
Allora, barzellette sono messo molto molto male, però magari, non so, il solito conteggio, non in inglese però, in dialetto magari. Prova, 1, 2,
Inglese, continua ad arrivare? Sì, prova. Vabbè.
Forte e chiaro, ti sentiamo. In
bene,
inglese.
molto bene. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Questa è una prova audio per tutti, cabine di traduzione, per...
Inglese, mi sentite?
Ti
7,
sentiamo, ti
8, 9,
sentiamo.
0.
In inglese ti sentiamo.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Prova conference, prova impianto audio, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, prova, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Prova per le cabine, prova, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, prova. 1, 2, 3, dimmi te Seve quando sei a posto, quando
Sì, mi
siete
deve
tutti
dare
a posto.
l'ok dalle cabine di traduzione.
L'ok dalla cabina, molto bene, allora vado avanti a dire non so cosa. Abbiamo tanti microfoni, tanti, io sono nell'ultimo della catena, quindi teoricamente se va questo vanno anche gli altri. Prova, 1, 2, 3, prova. Camera 1 impostazione, camera 2 è impostazione, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, luci accese, videoproiettore acceso, tutto pronto.
Dici tu Massi
per
quando sei
cominciare, tutto pronto per cominciare, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. 2, 3, prova audio, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, prova audio, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, 8, prova.
Sì, però dovevate anche ascoltarmi,
Staccavi, ma non ti ho mai sentito parlare.
Mi sentite in inglese? Ok, quindi stai parlando con me, ok, che sono in cabina. Sì, anche perché lui lo sento, Lui lo sento e va bene, però io ho bisogno di parlare io in inglese in tutte le cabine, perché quindi bisogna che mi stai in ascolto un attimo. Perfetto. Bene, bene. Allora adesso qui mi senti.
Sento perfettamente. Vai Mancio, parla pure.
Prova, parla 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, prova audio per tutti, per l'audio di traduzione.
Ho sentito che hai
Per
staccato,
lo
ma non ti ho
streaming.
sentito parlare.
Prova audio per tutti, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Comincio a avere caldo col felpone, il felpone è ora di toglierlo, togliamo il felpone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 e così.
Adesso mi senti, mi senti? Ok, l'ultima console, ce n'è una che non va, ma tanto non la usano.
Per lo streaming, prova audio per le cabine, prova audio per tutti, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, prova.
Prova inglese?
Prova.
Più basso dell'altra, ma
1, 2,
si
3,
sente.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, prova. Prova impianto audio, prova microfoni del conference system, prova 1, 2.
Prova inglese l'ultima volta, prova.
Guarda, voglio fare un'analisi.
L'ultima console, questa qua. Adesso tu mi senti di qua, no? Bene, basta, io ci sono. C'è la cabina d'inglese che è una console che non funziona.
Massimo, stai parlando dall'ultima cabina da cui hai parlato, come eri lontano dal microfono? Massimo, hai cavato le cuffie? Massimo? No, quello l'ho sentito, però l'ultima che mi ha detto mi senti, lo sentivo molto più piano rispetto alle altre. Va bene. Spegni pure Mancio.
Ok? Posto? A posto.
Inglese? Inglese?
Ti sento inglese, ti sento.
Scusa, è perché ho dovuto riavviare il sistema, quindi sto rifacendo le mie prove. Quindi se tu mi dici che inglese senti, va bene perché te l'avrei dovuto richiedere, ok?
Forte e chiaro, ti sento.
Di nuovo inglese. Di nuovo inglese. Ok, ok. Cambio.
E.
Di nuovo inglese, ancora. Prova a dirmi in cuffia. Ok, ok. Inglese, inglese, inglese. Bene, devo sentirmi anche io. Ecco, mi sento, perfetto.
Sei al posto di sopra, Massimo?
In realtà ho una console che è proprio quella dove passa tutto che non funziona, però al momento le altre stanno andando. In realtà dovrei, capito, metterla a posto e poi cercare di fare un'altra prova, però adesso la metto a posto e poi non tocco più niente. Tanto non la usano. inglese, inglese ancora,
Io qui ti sento forte e chiaro.
inglese, inglese,
Ti sento, ti sento. Arriva John.
attivo inglese anche qui,
Ti sento.
morning and welcome the third day of the 83rd session of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management. Before starting, I would like to announce that the report for the days of 3 and 4 October are distributed, and you have it on the table. You are asked, please, to comment by written and then to hand out to Mia. Where is Mia? Yeah. We will reflect the comments and then they will be reflected to the final report. Now we start with our agenda for today, and I remind you that we left in the middle the item 11 of the agenda, which is response to the COVID-19 pandemic at city level and building urban economic resilience. Yesterday you had the chance to listen to the presentation by Gulnara Rol, and also the presentation by Mr. Toktosun Sultanov, Deputy Chairman of Bishkek City Council. Today we will have a presentation from Ms. Olga Damianenko, Director, Department of Cooperation with International Agencies and Financial Institutions from Kharkiv City Council. The floor is yours, Ms. Damianenko.
Thank you very much. Good day to dear audience. I'm very pleased to have an opportunity today to give the speech here and to give you information on my city and on Ukraine. Of course, the topic response to COVID-19 pandemic at the city level now, it's getting less important for Ukraine because the response to the war in the country is much more open challenge than the pandemic COVID-19. And honestly saying, I wish all the cities to have more COVID-19 than to have the war, honestly. And we are now saying that all the losses that we had during the pandemic, of course, is nothing to compare for those losses that we have today because of the war. So first of all, I would like to start and to give you a short information on our city. Kharkiv is the city which located in the northeastern part of Ukraine, is administrative center of Kharkiv region and the scientific center. It's the largest city, the second largest city in the country after Kyiv, and Kharkiv used to be the first capital of the Soviet Ukraine. The population of Kharkiv in 2021 was 1.4 million people, and Kharkiv is the large scientific, cultural, industrial, and transport center of Ukraine. Before the war, the city had 60 research institutions, 41 institutions of higher education, including university, which is out of the top in the world today. The city further holds 8 museums, municipal art galleries, 7 state theaters, and significant number of non-state libraries, numbering approximately at 80 units. The industrial potential of the city was made up of enterprises of the machine building industry, and well as the chemical, electrical power, fuel, and food industries. And the industrial structure of Kharkiv region is one of the most progressive in Ukraine. It's made of the processing industries, and total share of which is 58%. There are more about 1,000 industrial enterprises. Of course, for now, not of them, a lot of them are not working now, but we can see that we are trying now to calculate and to do our best to understand which industrial enterprises are still could be reloaded after the work will be ended, and which are, of course, can be used then in another purpose. If we are talking about response to COVID-19, I will be very short, and I will give you the most important impacts which we get influenced in. So the impact, of course, was on the labor market. One of the highest levels of unemployment for the Ukrainian independence that we had was during the COVID-19. And Also a big impact on the business environment as a result of the lockdown measures, and numbers of industrial enterprises partially stopped their operations. The official statistics that we have on the volume of industrial products sold already indicated a decrease on approximately 7% during the COVID-19. A lot of factories such as Turboatom, the most biggest factory that are producing turbines, it's located in Kharkiv region, Elektrotezhmash, which are producing a lot of equipment for the rails and different machinery equipment, also stopped during the COVID-19 because those big enterprises have approximately more than 1,000 workers who are working on those factories at once, and of course the pandemic caused them a lot. Also there was impact on the financial environment compared to same period in 2019. For example, the revenues of the city budget decreased on approximately 15%, and while transfer decreased in approximately twice. So we as the city council made a lot of measures and take a lot of measures for the people who were renting land and who were renting some municipal properties. There were different programs on that. And we were trying to do the budget very balanced and to help business today and to help the people who were renting a lot of properties from the municipality. So these are the main impact that we had for COVID-19. Also, the city government that I told you developed multiple measures to combat the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. And the beginning of the pandemic, the city government created an anti-crisis committee, which includes heads of the large enterprises of the city and representatives of the city authorities. The funds were raised by the owners of the large enterprises in the city, which were used to purchase expensive medical equipment and support medical institutions and socially vulnerable segments of the population. A lot of money were given from the city budget, a lot of money were financing given from the national level, and honestly saying today, a lot of those equipment that were bought during the pandemic helped a lot during the war also. Because a lot of soldiers which are now coming from the eastern part of Ukraine, the first point where they are coming for their immediate rehabilitation is Kharkiv city. We have the biggest military hospital, and the first point where they coming is Kharkiv. And a lot of medical equipment, even during the pandemic and now, are given to this military equipment. And of course, we have now in our city, we have the biggest hospital on the emergency response. And this hospital is now all the time full, unfortunately, and for all the people, even from the region of Kharkiv, even from all the regions that are connected with our city and with our region, are also coming to that hospital. And this hospital was also one of that who were responding the first while the pandemic. So just to have small, and the result of these measures that were taken, the financial environment of the city of Kharkiv remained comparatively stable. So as of 1st April 2021, Kharkiv has received the following credit ratings. So we had a very good credit ratings comparing to that we were expecting. Honestly, the representatives of the different credit ratings were coming to the city and having their forecast, and all the main credit agency gave very good and stable ranking place for the city, and it was the highest for the cities, as the city ranking could not be higher than the national one. So even while the pandemic, the economy of the city was very stable, and we didn't even imagine that we can face the time that we are facing now. And after the pandemic, starting from the December 2021, the economy get on the normal level. So for now, according to the diagnostic assessment report that we were doing together with the UNECE, and thank you for them, we were working, and it was a separate work on that, and we were doing like the most influenced part of economy that were suffered from the pandemic, and the most where we need to resilience, the performances that we were doing. So this includes the local economic diversity, productivity, economic and financial capacity, size and depth of financial systems, and so on. So in general, the city administration successfully tried to minimize the impact of the COVID-19 in 2020 by improving the efficiency of budget expenditures management. And further, it was made some intergovernmental programs, and everything what was like supported by the government, the city fulfilled in that time. The support and the main recommendation from the UNECE that we received while we were doing this big analysis on the pandemic resilience and the pandemic influence of the city, that we need to create and establish a city reconstruction and development agency that will help us initially could focus on two main roles: leadership and the governance and the coordination of reconstruction and recovery. So we should assume additional economic and implementation roles as the situation stabilizes, and this agency should be managed by a board of directors appointed by the city council. So that would help to attract the financing, that will help to allocate the financing and to choose the most problematic spheres, and that city should quickly respond and emergently respond. We are now on the way of that. Now, of course, the situation is fully different, and we are now trying to reload the economy from the other way around. And of course, after the 24th of February, we honestly forgot about the COVID-19 problems. The problems became more open, the problems became more horrible, terrible, and such a lot of people that we are now losing, the soldiers and the civilians. It's not nothing to compare with the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we are doing now to respond as we could on the city level to most challenges that we have with the war, we are now trying to reload our economy with a new approach. We are working together with the Lord Foster Foundation. They attracted two very well-known experts who are from the universities, from the Harvard University, and they are working on the new economy model for the city, which will be related for the new master plan that we are now also ongoing. So we are trying, because we are understanding that the economy of the city after the war will not be anymore the same. A lot of industrial enterprises will close, a lot of people will be unemployed because there will be no place to work. Now Kharkiv is the most damaged city in Ukraine, in the different areas, in the residential estates, industrial sector, administrative buildings, social infrastructure. Just to give you several figures for your understanding. In Kharkiv, we had 220 schools. For today, 119 schools are damaged. So this is not the war with the militaries. This is not the war with the Ukrainian soldiers. This is the war with the Ukrainian nation. This is the war with Ukrainian civilian people who are suffering every day from the madness of the Russian authorities that are thinking that everybody should live as the dictator wants. And for today, Ukrainian people are giving this resilience and suffering a lot about that, but we are strong, we are very brave nation, and with your support and with the international support, and we are very thankful to that support. Otherwise, we do not have this confident inspiration inside of this victory that we will have in the end for sure. And we will, I very, very hope, and on behalf of all Ukrainians, I hope that, and I can say to you that we've really waiting for our victory, and we hope that it will be, and we are actually convinced that it will be, But of course, we're all the time thinking of the price of that victory, so we now trying to do all what we can in our city especially to save lives of our people. We started the new programs on the shelters, we started the new programs on the special shelters on the bus stops that we never done before, because the enemy are all the time trying to shield the people who are just walking along the streets, who are waiting for the transportation, who are just doing their ordinary things and ordinary actions that you are doing every day on your normal life. Today we have a lot of inhabitants staying still in Kharkiv. For our statistics that we are calculating today, it's approximately 1 million people staying in the city. Of course, the tendency of coming back now is very high, because people want to be back during the winter time in their flats, in their houses, in their homes. Nobody wants to stay anywhere, and of course, people also lack of the money and lack of the financing, so they are trying to get back home. A lot of children, a lot of elderly people. As for the city authority, of course, it's a great challenge because we need to supply everything to them and to do as much as we can for their support. But in one hand, we are happy that the people are coming back to Ukraine and coming back to Kharkiv. So for now, the situation is more, not so intense as it was, for example, a month ago, after the liberation of a lot of territories in Kharkiv region, and after the success of the Ukrainian army on that territory. The aggressor do not have any opportunity to shield the city with an artillery, so it's only the rockets and the missiles are now striking the city. But anyhow, the situation is still intense, because at any time in any city of Ukraine, anything can happen. So thank you for your support. Thank you for the support of all the countries in Europe, in the world, because in the first days of war, in the first months of war, without the international support, and even it was impossible, even not if we are not talking about the military sphere, if we are not talking about the weapons and so on, we're just talking about the main humanitarian aid that we gave to the people while the first days of war and while the first months of war. And it was all coming from our international partners, it was coming from our international partner cities that we have in Europe and in other points in the war. So due to that all, I hope that we all together will plan and upload the Ukrainian economy, and namely the economy of our city. And I hope that Kharkiv can become again, as it was before the war, the great scientific IT center of our country. And I hope that the most important, that Ukrainians should come back. Otherwise, we do not have any sense to do the new infrastructure, to do the new economy reloading or something else. First of all, we need to do everything and to create such conditions in the city and in the country that our people should come back and should stay safely in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Damianenko, and thank you very much for being here in person.
My pleasure.
And for sharing with us the big concerns that your country is passing these days, these very difficult days. As Gulnara mentioned yesterday, you had COVID and then you were hit by the war. So from one emergency to another bigger emergency. We have also experienced this passing from one emergency to the other, from terrible earthquake that we had in 2019 into immediately to pandemic emergency. However, and somehow we are powerless towards in front of natural disasters. But it's so absurd to be in front of human-made disasters. So of this aggression that happens without any notice. So it keeps you and it finds you unprepared. So very much thank you for being here and for sharing with us your the problems that are caused by COVID, and you successfully already overpassed the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, but with the emergency that you have now and the need for support to Ukraine. Now I open for discussion and for questions if you have. So I don't see any request. Then we read the decision that the committee take note of the outcomes of the Building Urban Economic Resilience during and after COVID-19 project and its deliverables. Take notes of the outcomes of the ECE-led U4SSC thematic group on urban economic resilience in cities, welcomes the activities of the Secretariat to support the implementation of the COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan for informal settlements in the ECE region. Thank you. Now we pass to the agenda item 12, Sustainable Development Goals, Voluntary Local Reviews measuring progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals and at the local level. The relevant documents for this agenda item are found at ECE/HBP/2022/5 and /6. And I would like to inform you that at its 82nd session, the committee endorsed the guidelines for the development of voluntary local reviews, VLRs, in the ECE region, called for cities to apply the guidelines to develop their VLRs, and invited the Secretariat to update the guidelines based on experiences with VLR development, as it is in the document ECE/HBP/208, paragraph 28. Due to the lack of funds, the Secretariat has not implemented the guidelines. The Secretary to the committee has thoroughly revised the guidelines, drawing on the experience gained from the ECE Smart Sustainable City Profiles and the Forum of Mayors. The revised guidelines take into account comments received from UNDESA, UN Habitat, and United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And now I invite Ms. Hanna Dodou to present the revised guidelines and brief the committee on the next step for the implementing these guidelines.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to be brief about introducing the revised guidelines for the voluntary local reviews. Before we invite the panelists to just come and share their views, I'm going to be very brief. So the idea of the guidelines, we try to make sure that the objectives are very brief and to the point. What happened is also we passed on the previous guidelines for comments from our UN development partners and, of course, UN Habitat, and we also incorporated their views. So I'm just trying to... So when it comes to the objectives, we retain the objectives, of course, of having evidence-based policies with the idea of enabling the local and regional governments to conduct a kind of review that looks into the 3 pillars of sustainability. And of course, we made sure that the idea is if you ground it in a very coherent approach, then you will be able to inform policy decisions. We kept the principles, but we tried to group the principles in a way that is more clustered. So you see the principles that are in bold. We try to have a broad-based analysis. We try to look into bridging the gap between the local, regional, and global. Make sure that everything is forward-looking, human-centered, evidence-based. We also looked into the issue of making it agile, looking into the disaster, and building in when we look into the voluntary local reviews. The most important thing you'll see in the guideline, the idea of using the voluntary local reviews as a tool for the government, which means that it's something they do alongside the normal policy-making processes or monitoring and evaluation processes. So the idea is that it's not something additional. There are a lot of discussions on you need to make a new committee or a new intergovernmental agency or body or mechanism to look into the local voluntary voluntary local reviews. The guidelines say, yes, you can refer to DESA that has a lot of guidelines on that, but this is not important. What's important is to look, to make sure that you incorporate it at the city level. And one way to do this is to look into the opportunity cost, because we know that the voluntary local reviews, when it comes to cities, is SDG 11, but SDG 11 is interconnected with a lot of SDGs. That's number one. Number two, whatever you do as a choice for policies, then there is something that has to be, you're going to sacrifice something else. So if you're going to say, I want to have more land for agriculture, then what does it mean when it comes to industry and vice versa? What does it mean for food security? So the point of this exercise, and there is details in the guidelines how they go about doing such an analysis, is when you want to start looking into specific areas that you need to look and focus into in the voluntary local reviews. So the idea is to put what are the priorities of the government. The voluntary local reviews will look into the priorities of the government, be it health, education, enterprise development. What are the priorities? We incorporate it into the policy making. Then when you want to look at the policy options, try to see what are the implications and what do they contradict with. So if you do SDG 11, it contradicts with what SDG. And this is very important. This chart here is basically, you see, it's a typology that was proposed by ICS, and it's exactly, this is copy-paste from their publication, because it's very powerful. So you could see if it's direct impact, if you choose a policy measure, it's direct impact in terms of positive or negative to what other SDG, and this will help you focus when you want to choose the policy options or you want to choose the recommendations. After this exercise is done, the idea is that the cities will say, these are the priorities, these are the policy options we choose because they have minimum negative effect with other SDGs or the highest possible positive effects on the other SDGs. So if you build, for example, the capacity of enterprises through having technical training, then this means a lot, not only for job creation, but also for technology, for economic diversification, but it has negative effect on what area. So that's the whole point of the voluntary local reviews. And of course, the idea at the end is to come up with policies that the governments could highlight to the donor community, the local governments, and to highlight to the cities. One point about the KPIs. Of course, evidence-based, the idea is also that they could use our KPIs for smart sustainable cities as one element, because there are a lot of indicators out there. Some of the indicators are difficult to collect because the national statistics or national statistical offices, be it at the national level or the local level, do not collect such statistics. So the idea is to choose, in addition to what we have as KPIs for smart sustainable cities, there is UN Habitat that also has some indicators, but the cities themselves as well can come up with other indicators to support the SDGs. The idea is that the indicators have to be really connected to the broader indicators that are internationally accepted as the common indicators for tracking progress towards the SDGs. One point to say is that the administrative records contain a wealth of data which can be non-statistical. So the type of laws that are being discussed or adopted, the number of institutions, the number of institutional mechanisms can also be integrated as sub-indicators. And every country, every city is a word in itself. There is no one-fit-all solution. What we're trying to highlight is broad implications and broad common principles or common guidelines. So thank you so much for listening. And like that, thank you.
Now to discuss on the revised guidelines, we have a panel. Ms. Raija Hänninen, Senior Minister Advisor at Ministry of Environment of Finland, Ms. Stephanie Führer, Scientific Associate, Swiss Federal Office for Housing, Switzerland, Mr. Lorenzo Kilgren-Grandi, Director, City Diplomacy Lab from France, Ms. Maris Tumel, Mayor of Jõhvi from Estonia, and Mr. Spiro Polalis, Head Zofnas Program, Harvard University in Cambridge, USA. So the floor is yours. According to the, we start with Mr. Ryan. Where is it? Sorry. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here about implementation of SDGs in the connection of local reviews and VLR guidelines. I will introduce cooperation and actions between local government and national government in this respect and raise examples from my own country, Finland. In Finland, Prime Minister's office coordinates a national sustainability work. We have had the National Commission on Sustainable Development for a long time, and it is chaired by the Prime Minister. It was established for the first time in 1993. The mandate of the committee is to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals are included in national policies, and it also promotes cooperation between actors in sustainable development. Commission is a forum gathering significant sectors together. The members include broad sectors, yes. For instance, ministers, members of parliaments, representatives from ministries, local governments and regions, as well as market sector and NGOs. At the national level, secretariat in the Prime Minister's office is in charge of voluntary national report. Finland's first VNR was prepared in 1916 and second one in 2020. Prime Minister's office maintained a constructive dialogue with Sdgs in this first VNR submission, and in particularly in process of 2020 VNR. That time, Sdgs began to express interest in producing their own local reviews. In all countries, regional and local governments play an important role in implementation of SDGs. Local governments are close to citizens and are responsible for the development and provision of basic infrastructure and services for them. So also VLRs provide an assessment tool on the progress towards achieving the SDGs at the local level. They also improve engagement of local governments for the implementation of agenda. Since Finland's first VNR in 2016, National government has acknowledged how relevant the mobilization and experiences of local governments can be when it comes to defining a multi-level approach to SDG implementation and localization. In 2019, the capital city of Finland, Helsinki, became the first city in Europe to submit to the UN a Vlr named From Agenda to Action. Helsinki's review illustrates city strategy in relation to SDGs. It also elaborates how to produce understandable and open information about the city's sustainable development and forward dialogue within the global community. Helsinki made its second VLR in 2021. Second largest city in Finland, Espoo, made its review 2020, as well as city of Turku. After this, several local governments are in process of preparing VLRs. To support this review process, local and regional governments need instructions and examples. Also, guidelines and other relevant materials are useful. Finnish cities were also involved in the development own guidebook, SDG Analysis Process Handbook. This handbook is an interactive workshop method for the needs of urban and local governments. The main objective is to increase the SDG expertise. This handbook was produced this year by 6 largest cities in Finland and also Association of Finnish Local and Regional Authorities. It was part of the SDG in Cities Network project. A few words about central government's support for sustainable urban development activities at local level. In Finland, local governments have strong powers, while there are no regional governments. The 5-year Sustainable City Programme from 2019 to 2023 is coordinated by the Ministry of the Environment. Program supports sustainable development at the local level in cooperation with ministries, local authorities and other stakeholders. 4.4 million euros government funding has been allocated for the program, and the total budget with other contributions is about 6 million euros. So far, about 80 local governments and 50 other organizations have participated in the program. The key themes in the work have been carbon reduction, smart solutions, health considerations, and social sustainability. Solutions have been sought especially to cross-cutting themes. We can call this multi-objective urban development, combining different components of sustainable development. Target of the Sustainable City Programme is to solve cities' sustainable development challenges and disseminate good practices, develop new solutions through pilot projects and replicate good practices. It's important to notice that program has enhanced awareness what sustainable urban development means in practice, boosted it and created concrete cooperation both among cities and between cities and state. Building cooperation at the local level is important because sustainability teams are not responsibility of individual sectors. Sustainability is often considered from technical or environmental perspective, in which case attention is mainly drawn to ecological sustainability. In the program, there is a strong focus on social sustainability as well. Generally speaking, cooperation and interaction have a key role in disseminating sustainability thinking and solutions. Program has developed networks and expertise and has activated local governments to practical actions on and sustainable development work. This government program also has supported international cooperation. Nordic workshop on voluntary national report and voluntary local reviews was arranged in 2021. The goal was to exchange experiences between Nordic countries on VLRs and linking them with city strategy development. Also, one topic was country and city level monitoring. Partnerships, experience sharing, and peer learning are key practices for successful sustainable implementation of SDGs at local level. To summarize, national government and city government authorities in Finland have been forefront on SDG localization practices. Close dialogue has been established with cities, National Association of Cities and Municipalities, and Prime Minister's Office. This includes participation of Finnish cities in global events and sharing experiences. And final slide. Few words about cooperation globally. The partnership between Finland and UN Habitat on localizing SDGs is connected to Finland's Africa strategy. It consists of twinning between Finnish and African cities. First cities have started already their cooperation. The project supports sharing experiences and working methods. Also, development of guiding and analyzing materials is part of the project. In conclusion, the realization of SDGs need work at all levels, at local level and national level, as well international cooperation with global networks. Producing VRRs is a critical part of the work. In this UNECE guidelines for the development of VRRs, in this work, UNECE guidelines for the development of VRRs are needed and support implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hininian. It was very interesting to note that you have a commission since '93. And it's the origin of sustainable development that later on has developed into what we know today as SDGs, but before Millennium Development Goals and so on. And I can also stress here the importance of institutional setup, because you have this commission that is headed by Prime Minister, so it transmits a strong message and the importance that implementing the Sustainable Development Goals have. So thank you very much for your experience, which is very useful for us. And now invite Mrs. Vlrs to share her own experience.
Thank you. As far as I know, there are no VLRs in Switzerland, and there have never been. But in Switzerland, we have lots of experience with the local level taking responsibility. The local level being first the municipalities, and then at the more regional level, it's the medium layer of government, the cantons. And this is why I was asked to talk about the Swiss experiences today in order to illustrate how a system where municipalities take their responsibility in the movement towards a more sustainable future can look like, even if there are no VLRs. So I want to thank you for inviting me to talk about this today. In Switzerland, federalism is very strong, and it's a very important feature of the whole institutional structure of the country. The important guiding principle thereof is what we call subsidiarity. It means that the higher level of government only takes responsibilities that cannot be fulfilled at the lower level. So this means that the municipalities then have many tasks, including in housing and in spatial planning. But, and the same then holds for the cantons, for the medium layer of government. So as soon as the municipalities are not able to fulfill the role for any reason, it's the cantons who take the responsibility, and only if this regional level is not able to fulfill this responsibility, the task goes to the federal government. And in order to fulfill these tasks, both the municipalities and the cantons, they also need revenue, because they cannot autonomously fulfill these tasks without having the money to do it. And they have this revenue because they can levy income taxes. And they also decide on how much income taxes they levy. So each municipality can set the tax rate, and the cantons can as well. And this system, and this is the crucial point, it is the layer of government that is closest to the local problems and challenges, and thus knows them best, and probably also knows best what can be done about them, that is also trying to solve them. It's only when they're not succeeding that the higher layer of government is implicating itself. And this can be either because there's this systematic problem that occurs everywhere, or because there are financial constraints. So some small municipalities, as soon as something gets very expensive, it's hard for them to fulfill their roles. And also when there's interdependencies among the municipality or the cantons. These interdependencies, they can be very tricky. Yeah, I'm sorry. These interdependencies can be very tricky to fulfill, and one important point is when it comes to taxes, because I said before, the fact that the municipalities and the cantons can levy their own taxes is very important for the whole system to work like this, for this whole federal system, but it also leads to tax competition. So it can be worthwhile, even for tax revenues, for a municipality or a canton to lower the tax rate, because it's income taxes which are levied where you live. So what can happen if you lower your tax rate is that people with high incomes, for whom the tax rates are particularly important, move to your municipality or to your canton, which then lowers tax revenue of the surrounding cantons or the surrounding municipalities, so which has external effects. And it has also an impact on housing, because then in the low tax municipalities or cantons, housing prices will go steeply up, and poorer people won't be afford to live there anymore, and they will have to move out, and this creates segregation. And in order to attenuate this problem, bigger cantons have some sort of mechanism to share tax revenue between municipalities. So municipalities can still levy their own taxes, decide about their tax rates, but municipalities where lots of rich people live have to share the tax revenue with municipalities. So this is with municipalities where poor people live. And this is a sort of mechanism to attain this problem. The same happens at the national level between cantons. And this mechanism is needed by the higher level of government because the problem by its nature cannot be solved at the layer of government it occurs at. Okay, now I want to give an example on housing that closes the circle, or that closes the circle with the Housing 2030 study that the committee did together with partners. And I want to talk a little bit about housing. So in Switzerland, housing is provided by the market, and housing is mostly rental. So there's an important rental market. About 65% of households rent the housing unit, and only about 35% of households own it. And but municipalities still have some wiggle room when it comes to housing through spatial planning, and also to do more, how do you say that, more non-institutional means. And given that, and also given that at the moment there are many different problems with housing in mountainous regions in Switzerland, we, so the federal government, just produced a guide on housing for municipality in mountainous regions. So we wanted to show the municipalities the wriggle room, what they can do even if they don't have institutional measures to apply, and also to motivate them to do something about the problem. And in working on this publication, it became very clear to me how different the problems in these municipalities are. And this despite the fact that they're all mountainous regions. So this is a subgroup of municipalities that shares an important characteristic already. So they're all mountainous, they're quite far away from the main transportation routes, there are no big towns or big cities. And despite that, the problems are very different. So you have on one hand, you have very touristic villages, where there's high demand, also from richer people from the cities. And this increased even with the COVID pandemic, because now people could work remotely and were not supposed to gather too much, so they thought it was a good idea to maybe buy or rent another house somewhere in the mountains. They now could work from a distance from there, and it increased prices in these municipalities tremendously. So when working on the publication, I heard an example of one town in the mountains where a small 3-bedroom rental apartment now costs you at least 4,200 euros a month in rent. And this is just for a family, it's just impossible. It's becoming impossible to rent your houses there. And then there's other maybe more remote and less touristic villages where you have a different problem, where younger people are leaving. Sometimes also because there's no rental market, so because in these villages people own their homes. And if you're a young adult, you don't want to live with your family anymore, but you're not ready to found your own family, you don't want to buy a house yet. You would just like to have a flat where you live. And then these young people, they leave for bigger cities. And then who stays there are all the people who still live in their single-family homes they built or bought when they had children, but which are not adapted to living when you're older. So the problems are quite different. But what's crucial, I think, is that people on the ground know best what is needed in their community. So these municipalities, they know quite well what they need. While we do not. I mean, I can ask them and they will tell me, but we as the federal government, we do not really know. At the same time, there are some problems which occur quite often, also in non-mountainous regions. So the problems are often the availability of land, like probably everywhere, and financing. And these are the problems we at the federal level then try to address. It is difficult to address the land availability. So here we're trying to set incentives for former state-owned companies like the railway company or the postal service. And we try to convince them to lend the land to cooperatives in long-term land rent contracts, like to rent the land for 75 or 19, usually the periods are like 75 to 99 years, to rent the land for good conditions to cooperatives. The problem we can more easily address is the financing problem. And here the government helps what we call limited profit housing or cooperatives. And interestingly for me, this includes even a layer that is even beneath the municipal level. So these cooperatives, they can be founded by anyone. So even if you're a private citizen, you can found a cooperative, and under some conditions, the government will help you with financing. And the municipality also can do that. They can found a cooperative, and then the central government will help with financing. And so they can for example, found a cooperative in a village in the mountains where you have housing for elderly people, who is adapted to elderly people. Or you can found a cooperative where you offer housing for young people who want to leave their family of origin but are not ready to found their own family yet. And then the federal government helps with financing. The financing mechanisms we have are mostly a rolling fund, which just gives cheap quite advantageous credits, and there's also a borrower cooperative that where cooperatives are members of these cooperatives, so housing cooperatives are members of the borrowing cooperatives. The borrowing cooperative will issue bonds at the financial markets and thus gives small cooperatives access to the financial market. And the Swiss government guarantees the loans of this borrower cooperative. I won't go in any details here because everything is described in the Housing 2030 report. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrer. What I could get from your presentation is that if you go according to what is sustainable, what are the sustainable goals, perhaps you don't need the VLRs. However, VLRs are not just a tool for monitoring, but they are also kind of principles. They give you recommendations on policy. So that's why we recommend cities to use the VLRs, because they give orientation to cities where they want to go and how they want to go. But what I would also like to highlight here is the system that you have, which is very much decentralized, and it was mentioned yesterday in the speech of Mr. Kyriakis, that decentralization is important. So you have a strong and very very decentralized system that municipalities can levy taxes, and they can arrange also kind of balancing so as to keep, to have this social responsibility for municipalities which are. I would not go into more detail on the specificity of these mountainous villages and the need for different needs, housing need that there are, but it's very interesting also to know that, also to share with the audience these differences, not only between countries, but also within the country, and the need to address differently. Now I give the floor to Ms. Maris Tumel, Mayor of Jõhvi, Estonia.
Thank you. Dear Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, it is great to be here in front of you and bring greetings from Estonia. First of all, about the location of Jõhvi. It is a small country located 2,500 kilometers from here in San Marino, in the northeastern part of Europe. It is a country with close neighbors across the Baltic Sea, being the well-developed Nordic countries like Finland and Sweden. Their social organization, values and principles have always been an example for us. At the same time, our immediate neighbor in the east today is the Russian Federation, which is acting beyond all logic and normality, waging a war of conquest in Ukraine and attacking Europe with an energy weapon. Jõhvi municipality is located in the eastern part of Estonia. It is only 30 kilometers from us to the Russian border. Until now, we have considered living on the border of the European Union and Russia as our own opportunity to be a bridge in trade and culture contacts. However, the imperialist aggressiveness of the eastern neighbor, which has been intensifying over the years, forces us to put our previously cautious optimism on the back burner and retreat into defensiveness. Nevertheless, there are 17 sustainable development goals at the United Nations level, which are universal in nature, nature and should carry all of us, I mean all mankind, forward. It is our human duty to make efforts in the service of these goals. As much as possible, in the next 5 minutes, I invite you on a short trip to introduce some examples at the local level. Jõhvi, the city of cranberries. The name of our municipality, Jõhvi, is very similar to the Estonian word cranberry, which is known as the healthiest berry in the world. Natural wetlands in the neighborhood of our city are also natural places for cranberries to grow. This way, this topic has also been reflected in our urban space, and people like it. The city of cranberries between the swamps and water bodies. There are only 1.3 million people in the Republic of Estonia, about 13,000 of whom live in Jõhvi. That makes 1% of the population. Similar to many countries in the world, most people in Estonia live in the larger cities. However, this year is characterized by the fact that while otherwise the population is in constant small decline, the Ukrainian war refugees who have been staying with us already make up about 3.5% of the municipality's population. We try to help them in the way we can. Now let me describe you some examples of our activities. The National Food Bank system works also in Jõhvi as the regional center. Goal number 1 and 2 talk about eliminating poverty and hunger. A so-called food bank network which helps to reduce the waste of high-quality food and distributed it to needy people has been created in Estonia. The food bank system is also used for donation to help Ukraine. Health promotion and sports are highly valued. It is our duty to keep all age groups moving. The quality of education is one of the main priorities. This creates future for our people. We have renovated most of our education infrastructure. The country is facing a salary increase of about a quarter of teachers. We value the people who teach us. The coding school has been launched in Jõhvi, is cooperation between the public and private sectors, which offer education and accommodation for free, and people from all over the world can apply there. Gender equality is making progress in Estonia. As proof of that, I am here in front of you. However, there is still so much to do. Fortunately, this field is developed at the best level in the world at our neighbors, the Nordic countries, and we have the privilege to learn from it so closely. United Nations World Water Day events takes place in our region, also in Jõhvi. To obtain clean and affordable energy, our engineers develop modern solutions by using the landscape created during the shrinking fossil energy production. Our national energy company is planning a pump hydroelectric power plant. Also, new, modern and rewarding jobs are created by the companies for which the public sector should create favorable conditions. We help to train the workforce. We invest into infrastructure. We are developing completely new areas for us. Having been a region of fossil energy, and the chemical industry for the past 100 years, we are now opening new ones for ourselves. For example, multimedia and film production. To promote equal opportunities, we adapt both of our urban space and, for example, public transport. To contribute our climate action, we move towards to eco-friendly public transportation. We are developing light traffic networks to connect sustainable living environment and communities. It creates a new quality in local mobility, helps to reduce car use. In the era of responsible consumption, economical use of resources and production, the reuse of our fossil energy production results in under the development once again. The production of calcium carbonate as a source material for the plastic industry. Every little move counts. We conduct campaigns to protect aquatic life. In the photo, you can see a sign with an appeal not to pollute the rainwater system with cigarette butts, as these end up in water bodies and from there in turn into living organisms. Roof gardening and insect hotel at the Jõhvi High School. Preserving biodiversity and halting species extinctions is global challenge. It literally starts at the grassroots level. In the photo you can see the roof gardeners of our high school, where attention to the cultivated plants and insect hotel has also been set up. We should also constantly engage in self-development in the field of peace, justice, and the rule of law and a strong institution. We have undertaken comprehensive progresses for conducting safety trainings and increasing crisis preparedness. Although this year has again brought a large-scale military crisis to the table, the risk of environmental disasters is also increasing year by year. This is also the case here, where there are no earthquakes or tsunamis, but occasionally there are tornadoes, extreme temperatures, and so on. As the COVID-19 pandemic has shown, no country or community in today's world is not protected or prepared 100%. We built a partnership to serve the goals of sustainable development, both across borders and within our community. People want to be together and take on challenges together. This photo was taken at the small community meeting this summer. The joy of a post-COVID reunion is really great. It was a short excursion of 2,005 kilometers to the Cranberry City in Estonia. I believe and know that there are many similar communities in the world, and goodness and several of mankind in mutual understanding is still possible. We have hope with the Sustainable Development Goal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Tumel. You mentioned and you passed through the whole SDGs, and I have a question, but I will leave it at the end, so when we open the floor. Thank you, and now we go to Mr. Spiro Polalis. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Actually, it's very difficult to follow the Cranberry City, which is my favorite berry. So I wish you had brought some cranberries. with you. Next time.
Next time, yes.
Next time. Let me start by saying that I would like to put a preface. What I'm going to talk about is completely irrelevant compared to what is happening today in the world. The environmental disaster that we experience is well beyond what I'm going to talk about. And I wish there were a few people, a few men, I would say, because men are the ones who bring the disaster at this point, who could put as a goal to save humanity and the planet. Instead, they try to destroy it any way they can. So, and I'm not talking only about what happens in the specific geography, but I'm talking about the environmental disaster, which is a result of going back to producing energy from coal, which is a necessity, because otherwise we cannot meet the energy needs of Europe. And having said that, let me go to the small things we're going to talk about with hope that things are going to improve and see what we can do. So, we are different than most of you. We are a research organization, and our research focuses, as it relates to this conference, on sustainability and climate action. And we have been introduced to the voluntary local reviews by UNECE and a few years ago, and we have a tremendous interest in pursuing that further. So if I go to the next slide, I welcome the updating of the guidelines. And having read the previous version, it was a very good description of what the VLRs are. By the way, my slides are not meant to be read. There is a lot of information, but it's going to be available to all of you. So the important thing is that the updated guidelines, I'm going to the right lower corner, to provide an evidence-based assessment for tracking progress towards the SDGs. And remember, the objective of the VLRs are the SDGs, to support the local and regional governments in their efforts to localize the SDGs and to adopt a coherent approach that ensures policy coherence that leaves no one behind. So this is a much improved version. I invite all of you to have a look. Ms. Hannah Dowdy mentioned about that earlier. I would like also to say that we see that trying to localize the SDGs happens not only in the public sector, but in the private sector as well. Private companies, large companies, they try to localize the SDGs in order to be along the demands of society. And I'm talking more about the Western world. So let's look at a very simple graph here. The voluntary local reviews, up on the left, are a tool for the local and regional governments to achieve the SDGs. So let's face that, it's very, very clear. The objective is not the VLRs, the objective is the SDGs. However, the SDGs have been written for the national level. And where KPIs are coming to, the performance indicators are used for the VLRs in order to quantify and in order to support evidence that we meet the VLRs. It's interesting that we can make an indirect link between the KPIs and the SDGs. The reason the voluntary local reviews are not well defined is because they adapt to the needs of the particular entity in order to meet the SDGs. So the links between KPIs and SDGs can be explained in these updated guidelines that have been posted on the website. And we can see that these are divided as they relate to economy, environment, and society and culture. Now, there is another acronym that we are all very familiar, which is the KPI for smart sustainable cities. And these are the KPIs dimensions that I mentioned here and how they are divided in the 3 areas, and they reflect the national priorities. However, these KPIs are not always available at the local level, and that acts as deterrent of cities to apply the VLRs because they find that they cannot have the information for the KPIs. What I'm going to show you very soon is that you don't really need to be hung up on that. You can have qualitative information, you can get information as much as you can have. And the other thing is that the KPIs relate smart cities with sustainable cities. This is quite an important point that I would like to make. In the past, we used to call a smart city a city that uses information technology to help the functions of the city. In today's definition, a smart city is using information technology not only to help the functions of the city, but also to be sustainable, use the information from the smart systems towards sustainability. And this is quite an important step which is not understood all over the world as much. But every time you're thinking about a smart city, remember, a smart city serves sustainability. There are many published VLRs, very diverse. We read this from the European Commission, the Handbook for SDGs for Voluntary Local Reviews, and many of you are from the other areas. We heard from Finland, from Estonia. Let me talk about an area that nobody has talked in our previous meetings, which is the United States. The United States is part of UNECE, and I can tell you what we see here. We see that they have 5 reports, and the United States is quite advanced on the VLRs, but in a different way. I would say that the only way to understand that is the way that the United States is being governed. There is a federal government. There is the state governments, 50 of them, and then the local governments of the cities. And many times there is not much connection about what happens at different levels. Actually, we have a representative from the federal government here from HUD that has been very useful, HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department of the federal government in our research. So let's look at the cities that we should pay some attention. It's New York that started in 2018, New York again continuing in 2019, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, the state of Hawaii, Orlando, and Los Angeles again. For those of you who are familiar with American politics, you can detect some commonalities among those. I don't want to enter into that. By the way, you see also cities in South America. And let me say here out of sequence that Los Angeles is very much connected to Sao Paulo. And they collaborate. And they collaborate with different cities in the Americas. Not so much with the rest of Europe. This is what we have been told on the research we do, and we're still at the very early stages. And by the way, everything I show here is in the public domain. We just read the reports. We had the opportunity to talk to people, but I don't want to disclose what we talked in person, because simply this is not a completed report yet. But we can see here, and you will have the slides, how Los Angeles, New York, Pittsburgh, Hawaii, and Orlando, they have used their reports. If we take Los Angeles, which is quite advanced, in 2019, it focused on 7 SDGs. In 2021, on 17 SDGs. And if I continue to my last slides, let's read some of the information that we found on their public disclosures. New York was one of the pioneer cities. However, New York does not depend so much on KPIs. It's more qualitative. Los Angeles pioneered the VLRs. And they did something that I would suggest those of you who don't do it to do it, which was to create an open web that they posted the information and they asked everybody to go, enter, and comment. That allowed the public to connect, and there are thousands of people who enter and comment on the information that they have posted. So transparency to the fullest extent. If we look at other areas, there is mapping of the different areas on how VLRs are being applied, and then the indicator systems do not follow, I would say, that UNECE at this point. They find it to be very useful, but somehow they want to find their own way on how they're going to help their people. One more thing. The information we have is at the city level, and they depend very much on the taxpayers' money for the city. It is run by the mayor's office, and that has a certain vulnerability. For example, I can share with you that the second and last term that is allowed for the mayor of Los Angeles to be elected, it's over in December, and the Sustainability Office and the VLR's office, which has done an amazing work, is not sure if it's going to continue under whoever is being elected mayor. So there is some volatility there. And since there is not support, actually organized support, institutional support from higher levels, then it is up to the city, which actually brings a very interesting question that I'm being asked from the first day, 15 years ago, that I started working on sustainability. Why should you do VLRs? What is the objective? What is the incentive? And if you try to find the incentive on anything else, it's not easy unless we realize that it is the reputation of the city and it is response to the demand of the citizens. We see that more and more people want to make sure that we are sustainable, and this is a grassroots, and the politicians simply reflect on that. And that is a very strong reason to believe why we should continue on VLRs. However, there is an inherent problem again. We cannot quantify, we cannot compare. We cannot say Los Angeles is better than New York or New York is better than Orlando in the VLRs. Why? Because we don't have an objective way to measure, and if we don't have an objective way to measure, we cannot improve. That's a very basic principle. So the challenge to all of us is to continue, try to think how we can quantify in a meaningful way, taking into consideration the resources of each city, and our research is always based on case studies. So we're still looking for cities or regional governments that they have done work that they would like to show to the world. And based on case studies, we can analyze what they do and simply identify islands of excellence so can be used as examples for the others. Thank you very, very much, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the revised guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Polalis. And I would say that it was very important what you shared with us, because it's about sustainability, about how to improve the environment, how to improve the life of citizens, and how to develop economy. So, and how to put them together with the smart sustainability. So how to be sustainable, but at the same time smart. But not just smart for smartness, but smart for smart people. So how to make people able to use this smartness of the development. You also highlighted the fact that countries, what also was mentioned by Switzerland, that in United States they don't follow the guidelines. Guidelines, I would say, that are not the objectives per se. It's not something that is done for the sake of having some guidelines. The aim of the guidelines is to show a way how countries can improve their performance. And if they have a system, then it's fine. But as you said, it needs to be a system that can put also some targets and objectives that can be measured and can be achieved. So, yeah, thank you very much for sharing with us this your work that you have been doing. And now I give the floor to Ms. Lorenzo Kilgren-Grandi.
Oh, it is indeed difficult, yeah. It's a mix of North and South of Europe. The correct pronunciation of the first name, by the way, should be Kilgren, but it's so difficult even in Sweden. So, well, I accept everything. Thank you so much. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the floor, and thank you so much to the UNECE Secretariat for this invitation. I'm really excited to share the floor with my colleagues, sharing their different point of view, but I see there is a lot of coherence with what we do. I thank to my colleague, Professor Polalis, for having started this insight coming from experts, and I will try to conclude it with the focus of the action of the City Diplomacy Lab, which I direct at Columbia Global Center, Paris. I will talk more of this center this afternoon at the session on Centers of Excellence. My focus, the focus of my intervention will be on the nexus, on the connection between city diplomacy and VLRs. Before that, and I apologize for those of you who are already familiar with the concept, I would like to focus a little bit on the revolution of city diplomacy. It is indeed a revolution. It is possibly the fastest growing dynamics in international relations, and it consists of a wide range of partnerships that cities and local governments weave with other cities and local governments located abroad, as well as with national institutions such as National Bank, national development agencies, as well as international organizations. So the Forum of Mayors is a good example of this, just like, for example, the UNESCO Creative Cities Network or Healthy Cities, which is a network that has been created by the World Health Organization. Why cities are doing so? Why cities and local governments are connecting with each other and with these foreign actors? Well, there is definitely proof that has been quantified by research of a positive impact on sustainable urban development, and on the other hand, on the reaction, recovery, and resilience in front of a systemic and unforeseen crisis. So basically, cities and local governments, they have a lot to do in terms of knowledge exchange, what we call peer learning, and joint programming. In a nutshell, city diplomacy has emerged as one of the best tools for the localization of the SDGs. And they do so with the methodology inscribed in SDG 17, the methodology of partnerships. But going back to the topic of my intervention, this nexus between city diplomacy and VLRs, well, this relationship is in fact two-way. On the one hand, we can see that the lens of city diplomacy is both useful and necessary in understanding and analyzing why cities engage in this exercise, why cities are keen to enter into this VLR exercise. So we have touched on this topic during the previous presentations. It has been mentioned by Madam Chair, the important contribution of the orientation. There is the local purposes, in fact, of participation and transparencies in setting up processes of co-creation and co-responsibility towards sustainability. But on the other hand, there is this other topic that has been mentioned by my colleague, Professor Polalis, which I would define as global awareness. And as my colleague correctly highlighted, this is both at the level of the local government and at the level of citizens. So there is this understanding that the major challenges that we are all facing today are both global in nature and mainly local in impact. So if we think, for example, more recently to the pandemic, 95% of cases are located in urban areas. And this dimension, they are also parallel with other challenges such as migration and rising inequalities. So this is no surprise that the SDGs are themselves found at the center not only of the local strategies, but more increasingly so in international action. And I thank the colleague from Finland to mention this collaboration that they have in place with UN Habitat to have the SDGs and the VLRs at the center of this example of city diplomacy. I have to say that on the other hand, we can see that the VLRs are also helping consolidating city diplomacy. So city diplomacy is definitely rising, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of you have never heard of it. There is need for consolidation, of course, and understanding and study. And first, VLRs, they give legitimacy to the local action for global goals. And this is basically for the way that the SDGs have been designed, because if I, of course, agree with Professor Prolakis that the SDGs have been designed mainly by nations for nations, still 1/3 of the 232 SDGs indicators defined by the UN can be measured at the local level. And what is even more important, the 75% of the SDGs depend on the direct action and involvement of local governments for their achievement. So this is definitely a move towards the legitimacy of this kind of action. There is also the important impact in terms of developing a local language, a common language for city diplomacy and common ambitions. And the second point on how VLRs consolidate city diplomacy has also been touched during this panel. So it's basically what I call one of the main components of city diplomacy, which is international advocacy. So VLR demonstrate the impact of cities, the capacity to innovate in a number of global challenges, and by doing so, they empower cities in their two main advocacy challenges that they are currently involved in. The first one is the one of decentralization. The colleague from Switzerland mentioned the fact that Switzerland recognized, the federal government recognized the importance of subsidiarity. It is usually on paper the same case for most of governments in the world, but the application, especially in terms of financial elements of the money to implement the subsidiarity and decentralization, is not much widespread. So this is definitely a common challenge. And the second challenge is that of multilateral governance, the ability of different layers of government to connect with each other in order to discuss and jointly address a common topic. The Forum of Mayors represents a big step towards this multilateral governance, but of course there is also a lot to do, especially in other regions of the world. This being said, similarly, VLRs and city diplomacy also share some weaknesses. And this can be seen in sheer numbers. We have just seen the stats of cities and local governments that have produced the VLRs. This is very much a minority of cities. So it's very rare for small cities, even though we have seen there are important positive examples, to engage both in VLRs and city diplomacy. And the impact is in fact that they might be an additional tool to create and reinforce the gap between the successful global cities and those who are lagging behind, what we define in Italy usually the internal cities, because also geographically they're usually located in the internal regions of countries. This is the first point. The second point is that both VLRs and city diplomacy can be defined as overcrowded environments. So in terms of city diplomacy, there are more than 300 city networks. We have been studying them over the last year at City Diplomacy Lab, and we have seen that there are so many different overlaps and duplications that doesn't help the choice of local governments and local leaders of the selection of the best network to choose. And at the same time, the multiplicity of approaches to VLRs also might create some confusions to those local governments who approach this topic without guidance. So this is why it's important to have guidelines. Often, and final point, the final weakness that I can see is shared is and I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anyone, but in fact there is often a self-celebratory purpose. Rather than real change, what is looked upon is in fact the spotlight of the news, of the international stage, and in both cases we can see that when this is done, it is usually short-lived. However, I do believe that we can all share the enthusiasm that is embodied by those who follow city diplomacy and VLRs jointly, because they both processes, in fact, they respond to a fundamental characteristics of humanity today, which is the composite, multi-layered identity of both individuals and communities, which is at the same time local and global. They both offer, VLRs and city diplomacy, a key to interpret this dual nature and bring the two extremes, in fact, into fruitful dialogue. They respond to uncertainties of today, even more so tomorrow, with a sustainable, just, inclusive, and resilient approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorenzo. It was very interesting to connect the VLRs with city diplomacy, and you explained very deeply how the VLR are in support of this city diplomacy, and how they connect to the global challenges, which in fact are faced by cities, most of them. And we were very familiar during and after COVID reading and saying that cities are in face of the biggest challenge, and they are those that are facing directly the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic, and they had to address also the problems of that it caused, but not only pandemic. This is also true for any other emergencies or any other challenges that is related with sustainable development. And you mentioned that some 75% of these VLRs are directly influenced by the action of the cities. So thank you very much for your intervention. I see United States wants.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everybody in the meeting and distinguished colleagues. The United States welcomes this session's emphasis on the importance of voluntary local reviews and UNECE's work to advance the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In partnership with many UNECE member states, the United States advances all 17 Sustainable Development Goals globally throughout a wide array of partnerships, programs, and assistance. But we couldn't do any of that without support from our local partners. The Biden administration recognizes the importance of integrating the ideas of our cities and our communities into policymaking to ensure nobody is left behind. To this end, Secretary of State Blinken recently announced the first special representative for subnational diplomacy Ambassador Nina Hashigan. Under her leadership, the State Department will strengthen engagement with local partners, foster connections among cities in the United States and abroad, and develop solutions and partnerships to tackle key issues facing local and state actors. Like others in the UNECE community, the United States is not a unitary actor. The United States is a collection of national and subnational governments, civil society, private sector, religious organizations, and more. The U.S. approach to sustainable development is thus a whole of society one, and much of it begins, as it should, at the local level, far from Washington. We're inspired by the efforts of our city, state, and municipal leaders. Leaders in the cities of Los Angeles, New York, Orlando, Pittsburgh, and the state of Hawaii, as Professor Spiralis mentioned, have completed voluntary local reviews, and Carnegie Mellon University and Auburn University have completed voluntary university reviews. Other cities, including Phoenix, Rochester Hills, and more, have committed to conducting their own VLRs. This reflects the forward-leaning, thoughtful approach our local leaders take to the SDGs and the central commitment to leave no one behind. This subnational leadership is a strength that UNECE member states widely share. Locally led development, informed by grassroots democratic institutions and commitment to human rights, is what makes development truly sustainable. We've learned a lot from the experiences that the panel has shared today, and as Lorenzo just mentioned, we don't want this to be an effort that dies quickly. So please reach out to me at the UN or any of your embassies in your home countries with ideas on how we can leverage VLRs and form other forms of subnational leadership to advance the 2030 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, United States. It will be reflected in the report, and also we will approach, for further cooperation in this field. Italy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I share the vision of Professor Pollalis about the key function of ICTs in the smart sustainable cities. But let me add that smart sustainable cities also imply resilience, so urban policies, quality of public services, smart governance, smart people. In other words, an holistic approach to urban and social phenomena. Thank you.
Thank you, Italy, for noting that. Greece.
Thank you very much for all these so interesting presentations. First question to Mrs. Führer, who did an excellent presentation of what's happening in Switzerland. The question is, does the forfait have impact on housing in the specific regions you mentioned?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
If the forfait, you know the forfait?
The forfait?
It's the, well, it's in French but for example, in the canton of Bern, you have myself, who are a millionaire, yes, which is not true, it's exactly the opposite, even in sense I'm not. And with the tax authorities, I have a fixed taxation. What's the impact? So, if I win billions, it's only the 1 million I have really arranged with the Swiss government, with the Swiss authorities. This system, which is rather controversial in some cantons, what's the impact in housing, especially in the mountainous regions?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I think the example I gave of this village in the mountains, where really these rents are getting very, very expensive because all the apartments. So there was also a change in zoning laws and in spatial planning, which made that these mountainous villages, they can't just expand their territory. They can't just build more if the demand increases. So it's very difficult to build. It's become not very difficult, but it's become more difficult to build more. And so the impact of a foreigner having a forfait, or just someone who has money and buying up these properties which are in these mountainous regions, would be more or less the same, I guess. And what happens is really that in general you have these price increases. Yeah, and it is a big problem. So, and at the end it's probably a problem of inequality, right? So the underlying problem is that you have these inequalities and you have these people who are very, very rich and who can just buy up a second and a third and a fourth home, and the first home for some other people becomes unaffordable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the response.
Because thank you. My second question.
But okay, but please briefly because we are running a bit.
Okay. Let's say it's to Professor Polalis and also to Lorenzo Grandi. It's that you mentioned that it's somehow curious that Los Angeles, for example, has more relationship to São Paulo than to European cities. Maybe, according to my opinion, the reason is that the European cities are very much focused in their own system. And, for example, in the different directions of the European Commission, because their financing depends on what's decided there. So it's a kind of cocoon. They're living in many sectors. But in other one, as climate change or C40, the collaboration has been really very, very important because Los Angeles had also the presidency of C40. So there are sectors where the collaboration is important and others where the Europeans live in their own world. I don't know if you agree on that. But, and to Lorenzo is this that you mentioned about exactly, it's very difficult really to see the impact on VLR, but you mentioned really the networks. We must not forget also the bilateral city diplomacy. And I'll mention only, for example, a small example. Greece doesn't have recognized Kosovo, but the mayor of Athens went to visit the mayor of Kosovo, which at the government's level could not have been really so possible. So they set up really plans on economic cooperation, and that's an indirect contribution to the SDGs, and it's a question also of collaboration on the Vlrs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question and comment. I had a question, but I see that we have we are running a bit out of time. If you can briefly answer, both of you from Latvia and Estonia and Finland, because Finland is from national government and you are from local government. You explained the VLRs and the SDGs, and you went through all of them, but as Hannah mentioned in her presentation, there is also a kind of trade-offs between which objective to concentrate. Do you have priorities? This is a question for both of you, Finland and Estonia. Priority in, have you identified, because also Mr. Polalis explained how Los Angeles is focused on first some 5 and then extended the number of SDGs that are being more focused in or prioritized.
In the sense that as you focus your policies towards the SDGs, do you feel that you have to, there is like a kind of a trade-off that you have to do? You have to focus more on food, for example, on the banks, food banks versus, how do you go about focusing the priority actions? Because you cannot address everything at one go. That's the point.
Yes, I think the main goal is to deal with all of this. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Of course, I introduced for you the idea of sustainable city program, what central government is funding at the moment. Of course, that main focus is SDG 11, but like I emphasized that there are also social considerations, economic considerations, and multi-approach. So I would say that it's up to cities to decide. And most important is that they start from something, and involving citizens and raising awareness is an important part of that exercise and that work, and to continue that work.
Thank you. And thank you to the whole panel for your very insightful presentations and very informative. Thank you. Now we go to the committee. At the end of this session, the committee endorses the updated guidelines for the development of voluntary local reviews in the EC region and call for cities to apply the guidelines to develop their VLRs. Welcomes activities of the Secretariat on the development of the online training portal, the organization of capacity building activities, and testing of the guidelines in pilot cities at their requests. Now we pass to the agenda item 13, implementation of the United for Smart Sustainable Cities initiative. The documents for these agenda items are ECE/HBP/2022/5/inf.8/inf.9. And I'd like to inform you as follows. As part of the UNDA-funded project on smart sustainable cities with innovative financing, the Secretariat supported the city governments of Podgorica, Montenegro, and Tbilisi in Georgia in the development of their smart sustainable city profiles. In addition, with the support of the government of San Marino, a smart sustainable city profile was elaborated for San Marino. The city profiles were developed using the U4SSC that were presented this morning, previously, key performance indicators for smart sustainable cities. To further support cities in achieving the SDGs, the Secretariat will develop a background document which will contain an outline of future activities on digitalization and digital transformation of cities in the EC region. To support the preparation of investment projects at the city level, based on recommendations of the Smart Sustainable City Profiles, the EC Secretariat, in cooperation with the Committee Bureau, developed a project proposal for the ECE Smart Sustainable City Project Connector. The proposal will be presented to the committee. Over the past year, the Smart Sustainable Profiles for Tbilisi and the Republic of San Marino have been developed, as were mentioned. The profile of Podgorica document is, you can find it in the document ECE/HBP/2022/info.7 is being developed. Yesterday, the government of the Republic of San Marino presented its Smart Sustainable City Profile during the press conference. And today we will hear from the captain of the Castle of San Marino, who will speak about the system of local government, particularly the mechanisms in place to ensure broad consultation with inhabitants. We will also hear from the city of Tbilisi that will be present present its Smart Sustainable City Profile, and I understand from the Secretariat that work is underway for developing Smart City Profile for Podgorica. Now I invite again Hannah to introduce the main findings emerging from the profiles Tbilisi and the Republic of San Marino, work underway for developing background document on the future activities on digitalization and digital transformation of cities in the EC region, and EC Smart Sustainable City Connector. And I invite Ms. Martha Thorne, again, good morning again, that also Dean at IE School of Architecture and Design in Madrid, Segovia, and former Executive Director of the Pritzker Architecture Prize to moderate discussions under this agenda item. And we will see in the panel Mr. Tommaso Rossini, Captain of the Castle, San Marino, Mr. Andrea Basilaia, Deputy Mayor, Tbilisi, Georgia, and Mr. Ioane Menabde, Head Spatial and Urban Development Agency of Georgia. Now I leave you the floor to moderate.
Good morning once again.
Oh, sorry. First is Hannah.
Yeah.
Sorry. First is Hannah, and then, yeah, but you can moderate.
Yeah. I just want to quickly highlight the whole approach. Sorry. I just want to quickly highlight, set the context and just highlight what exactly we're doing with the smart sustainable city profiles. Of course, it has been mentioned a lot over the over the morning and a little bit yesterday. The idea is to enable cities to use the information technology as a tool for upscaling the implementation of the SDGs. So smart solutions in a way so that they could arrive at efficient and effective way to address the different challenges, be it in SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, in housing, what smart solution can be done for retrofitting, for example. So we have, the whole concept is having KPIs as a way for measuring a standardized way which measures the SDG progress towards the SDGs at the local level, of course. And these are a set of 122 indicators that were developed in collaboration with all the partners that are listed on the slide, including ITU, of course, and other agencies. So, and it is the whole concept is within this United for More Sustainable Cities. So that is the background. What has been done so far in using the KPIs to highlight the smart sustainable city profiles, i.e. to what extent do cities use ICT solutions across the different, at all to achieve the SDGs at the 3 pillars of SDGs, economic, social, and environmental. To what extent do they use ICT? We did that using the KPI indicators that were developed with ITU. So you see, so far there is Armenia that has been done. You have all the countries listed. These have already been completed. What happened is that there has been a revision for the smart sustainable cities, and this revision you could see already reflected in Tbilisi and in the country profile for the Republic of San Marino. The idea is that, as also the professor was saying and everybody was saying in the previous panel, the cities do not have the data for collecting enough data to measure according to the indicators. So lots of cities were able to only have 45 indicators. Others would have 79 indicators. So there is already a problem with data because there is a problem at the national level and the local level. So to address this, the profiles have an explicit focus on the legal analysis. So you see the laws. There is also more active interviews to bridge the gap and gain an understanding, and then also to bridge the gap between the national and the local at the city level. So these layers were already integrated, and you'll see that this is happening with Republic of San Marino that is completed, Tbilisi, Georgia, which is completed. Podgorica, we're still in the process of developing the city profile with Podgorica. There has been delays for several reasons, but we are going to complete it and it will be presented next year. A little bit about this connector project, it has been developed, but it's still being, because we're developing with a lot of partners, and Gulnara, our regional advisor, will tell you more about it when she speaks about technical cooperation. She has been working with different partners to develop it, so it's not easy to just simply develop it in a year, so it's still being developed, the connector. With regards to digitalization, we have developed something which will be also presented in when we speak about our land administration and what has been done. So with this, I'm just going to close the discussion. One thing, we're also going to open the door for the KPIs. We're going to have further further revision or improvement of the KPIs to reflect on the experience we have gained so far. So I just wanted to highlight the context, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, Madam Secretary, for the background information. It's always very important to understand the context. I find it particularly rewarding that innovative cities are looking to technology and other means for improving quality of life. And of course, we know that technology in and of itself is not the answer, but it's a means to many things. Many positive things. Digital transformation is not easy. It's not an easy task. It's not easy to collect data, as Madam Secretary said. We need the data, but there are also issues of security, privacy, and there are issues of transformation in processes and in behaviors. So perhaps we could start, and if you don't mind, we would start with our wonderful hosts in San Marino.
It's here. No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps you would. I'm so sorry. Perhaps you would start and give us a small presentation of where you are, what you see as the challenges and the hopes for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to everyone to come here in the Republic of San Marino. It's a great pleasure for me to host you in my small republic and my city. I'd just like to tell you briefly the story of San Marino, just so you can understand why we remain independent for 1,700 years. And so San Marino was founded in 301 AD by a stonemason who came from Dalmatia, specifically from the island of Rab in Croatia. And we remain independent since ever then. Therefore, what we have most important is our history, the history of a people and a place that has maintained independence, freedom, and democracy for 1,700 years. Over the years, we have defended our status through diplomacy and foresight, but also by fighting wars. We have built our city and our fortification to defend ourselves and not to attack. Our strength has always been the humility of knowing our limitation and the willingness to live peacefully with our neighbors. In the history of the Republic, there are several episodes that recognize San Marino as a free and independent state. The two most important ones I would like to mention are the meeting with Napoleon Bonaparte, who consecrated us to the world as an example of freedom, equality, and democracy. A democracy and a form of a government that originated in the 13th century with the first regency couple and was completed in the status of the 17th century. A simple yet democratic form of government from its earliest formulation, with representation in the Council of the Family Head. The second I would like to tell you is the passage of Giuseppe Garibaldi, who, chased by the Austrian army, found a refuge with his 1,000 soldiers in San Marino. But San Marino could never have prevented the Austrians from entering. So it resolved the issue by helping Giuseppe and Anita Garibaldi escape into the night. This move saved both Garibaldi and the independence of our small state, and brought us to the headlines, so much so that Italy recognized us as an independent republic. San Marino has always distinguished itself as a hospitable and neutral Pacific country. Thanks to diplomacy, it has been able to forge relations with many peoples. San Marino is a small country with no raw materials, energy source, or water resource, but for more than 1,700 years, it has been able to maintain its population and sovereignty, and today it is part of important international bodies. The relationship that binds the citizens to government is direct. They elect their representative to the council, which according to the majority appoints the state congress composed of the secretaries of the state, the ministers. We don't have a prime minister, but we have a regional couple, the captain regent. The captain regents are the highest judiciary of republic. They exercise collegially and with mutual right of veto the function of head of the state and government. That is why they remain in office only 6 months. At each regency, and it is from the beginning of the history of San Marino, at each regency change, any citizens can submit a petition called Istanza d'Arengo, which is a request of common interest that it poses directly to the captain regent, and they are obligated to bring it to the Great General Council within their 6-month term. Castles Council are elected by the residents of each castle. Our municipality in San Marino, we name it Castle, okay? And since 2020, foreigners residing in San Marino can also vote in Castle Council elections. Our task is to assist residents and present their requests to the governing bodies. So our role becomes point of reference both for the citizen when they address to the government and for the government when it addresses the citizens. In fact, when there are by the government major change to the road system or service, the council are involved to communicate them to the citizenry. This is why public conferences are often held where sometimes debates and direct confrontation between the government and the citizenry arise. In San Marino, many services are public, such as healthcare, schools, but also utilities and public works. Therefore, it's also up to us, the captain of the castle, to keep relation with the state campaigns to point out of them the critical issues of the territory and follow up on their resolution. But we do not always have autonomous decision-making power. We have no portfolio, and for any work that require extraordinary economic expenditure, we have to turn to the central government, which decide whether or not to proceed with the work. And this is quite frustrating for us. But while San Marino is independent in a legal form and government, it is not so when it comes to energy and water needs. As we all buy electricity and gas from abroad, our territory does not have such large areas to host wind or photovoltaic parks capable of covering national needs. We are doing something and one of the interventions we have been putting in place for a few years is remote photovoltaic. On the roof of some warehouse in the industrial areas, photovoltaic panels have been mounted by private companies that produce energy for civilian homes. The roofs are leased and the systems are owned by private individuals who sell the electricity produced directly to the state company, which give a rebate equal to the same kilowatt hours fed into the grid. On the other hand, as far as water supplies is concerned, we are still far behind. We have been studying a solution for years, but have not yet had the courage to implement any of them. Among the best solutions, certainly the most immediate, is to eliminate the waste, and we are working on this. The last period in Italy, and therefore also in San Marino, electricity and gas prices have increased so much. And what we are witnessing is a real profiteering by private companies that are taking advantage of the situation. This is leading families, and especially medium and small business, which are the engine of the Italian economy, to bankruptcy. This summer, electricity and gas costs have increased by 300%. If we don't take immediate action to defend these categories and against the multinational corporations that command the energy market, the landscape ahead will be a sharp division between classes of rich and poor, and case of destitution will increase, as they are already increasing. Aspiring to sustainable development also means protecting every segment of the population by ensuring a dignified life and access to energy and water for all. I thank you very much for this opportunity and to come here in San Marino. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rossini, for giving the background and some of the major challenges. Now, may I ask the Deputy Mayor of Tbilisi, would you like to make some opening remarks about your city and the progress and situation for smart and sustainable cities?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank, of course, Mr. Rossini for being a wonderful host and hosting us here. It's been a very welcoming experience. Tbilisi has been ongoing major reforms and changes in the last couple of years, 5 to be exact, and we are very happy when the UNECE approached us to make a smart sustainable city profile for the city, because we have engaged in quite a few strategic documents in the last couple of years, namely the master plan of the city, the sustainable urban mobility plan, the waste management strategy of the city, and now the smart sustainable city profile, which really gave me personally and the mayor very important insights because as mentioned by Ms. Hanna, we realized that we are not measuring some very important data which could be used for the city to really evaluate our progress and plan our programs better in the future. And the second realization, which was very important to me, was, as we all know, cities have very different ownership and responsibilities as it comes to very important components in the cities. For example, in the city of Tbilisi, mayor's office and the city council is not responsible for the police or the law enforcement. It's not responsible for the basic utilities such as water, electricity, gas, and they have been sold to private investors years ago. So each city, but of course politically, the mayor's office is responsible because we are the place where all the citizens come with their problems. So we need to make sure that the city is moving in the right direction, not just in terms of the direct responsibilities of the city, but as the profile showed us, which was broad approach and showing all the, the broad data, the broad sectors which are not directly linked to the city, but of course are very important. So I'm very sure that this profile will be very useful in the future for making sure that we're progressing in the right direction. Today, I want to focus on a few areas which we are in direct control of and which have been very important areas of reform in the city. I will start with the transport reform, which has been ongoing for 5 years. The situation is quite dire in the city. Tbilisi is very dependent on private car use. We have about 7-8% motorization rate each year, so the private car use is rising. We have managed to get help from international consultants and IFIs and we realized that the only way forward for us is to make the public transport a priority and devote major resources to changing the behavior of our citizens. And the first big project was that we replaced all the existing buses and minibuses in the city. Of course, this wasn't just for the transport purposes. The studies that came out in the recent years showed that municipal transport was the #1 source of air pollution in the city. So this was really our #1 priority. And as I mentioned, with the help of IFIs, it costed the city about 180 million euros, but we managed to replace all the 860 buses and 1,000 minibuses which are servicing the city. Unfortunately, Tbilisi used to have tramway and trolley system which were dismantled during the civil wars and unrest times in the 90s. So we only have the bus system and the metro system to rely on, and the next focus, of course, will be the metro and subway system upgrades. We have designed rapid transit corridors throughout the city. We have identified 10 such corridors, and 2 of them are already being completed, and of course this will be an ongoing project because at the moment about 30% of the buses are late and cannot service the passengers because they're stuck in traffic jams. We've changed the approach to street design. Streets were not accommodating for pedestrians. They're not accessible for people with mobility issues. There are no green spaces in the city, so we really changed the approach, and all the infrastructure projects that we engage on are much more comprehensive than just pavement job. We do it comprehensively. We change the way street looks, and we limit the amount of lanes used by private cars to really make sure that, as I said, the public transport is the best and fastest way to get around. And we've just signed an agreement with the help of the government of Germany, and we'll be implementing the intelligent transport system in Tbilisi within the 4 years. Of course, I have to mention that this reform has been really painful. The public backlash has been extremely harsh because, as I mentioned, most people still use cars to get around. And while we are in this transitional period, politically it's been very hard. But of course, we see that our goal is being reached. Just last week, we had a record number of passengers, of citizens who used the transport system, over 1 million, which is a new record. So we know that we are heading in the right direction, and we'll keep this reform going. Of course, not all reforms are politically painful. Another major reform that we have undergone is the parks and urban spaces and the approach that we have changed in the city. Originally, a very small budget allocation was given to these areas, roughly 3 million euros per year. Currently, the city allocates about 30 million euros per year to rehabilitate the existing spaces, to open new parks, and the result is that over the last 5 years, we have rehabilitated and opened over 1,000 new public spaces in the city. Some of them are as small as 50 square meters, some of them are as big as almost 10,000 meters. We have also made the commitment to rehabilitate all the existing parks in the city, and we're building new ones. We have built over 20 new parks in the last 5 years, and when I say parks, I mean over 10,000 square meters. We've also have a very big problem with urban forest degradation, and we have started a very rapid urban regeneration project. We have replanted over 20 hectares of urban forest, and this is an ongoing project which will keep going, and of course we will be allocating more resources because the public and political opinion of this has been very positive. Every new space that's open is immediately full of people, so we know that this is the right agenda for the city. But of course, the city of Tbilisi is not without problems, and one of the major problems and the legacies that we have is the housing, the Soviet housing blocks issue. The current situation is that these houses are nearing their logical time frame. They are in very dire straits. We have identified close to 10,000 buildings that will need to be addressed within a 10-year period. and about 1,000 buildings which are in need of immediate attention. As I mentioned, they're structurally unsafe. They have no safe or suitable environment around the building. There's no parks, there's no suitable places for children. There's no urban or infrastructure around. There's issues with schools, kindergartens, and infrastructure such as this. Of course, there's no accessibility in these buildings, and people have very big issues who live there. There's pretty much no fire safety, as these buildings were built in the 50s and 60s during the Soviet Union with the purpose of quickly relocating people to new districts, and modern urban standards were not really taken into account. And of course, all these blocks have really low cost of real estate value. So for all these years, the private sector hasn't really engaged and hasn't really come in. So this is why we decided to start the new program this year. The aim of this program is to slowly but systematically go and address the most buildings that are in most need of attention. It's partially funded by the budget. What the city used to do, and everybody came to realization that it wasn't effective, is that city would allocate about 20-25 million Vlrs, which is about 7 million euros each year, to reinforce these old buildings. But of course, this is a Band-Aid solution, because these buildings would come back to us in 4 or 5 years with the same issues, and nothing was resolved, and the quality of life in these buildings remained the same. So we are allocating all this money that we're allocating for reinforcement towards rebuilding. We are changing the development rights in this district to add a few floors and create new space, which is then given to the local development and construction companies. So it's partially funded by the budget, partially the local companies come in, and of course the aim is to create secure and healthy living environment, not just reinforcement of concrete buildings. What we hope to achieve is, like I mentioned, high and modern safety standards. Of course, the city controls the planning and the detailed design of these buildings, so we make sure they are not built with the profit maximization in mind, but things such as energy efficiency will be incorporated. Of course, we're not talking about some premium class of buildings, but all of these buildings will have all the necessary and modern requirements. Of course, we are taking responsibility to develop the areas around the buildings to make sure there's parks, there's squares, there's kindergartens and schools around. And of course, this will create significant growth of real estate value, which means that in the long term, the city will benefit, as real estate tax is the main income for the city. So in the long term, we think that this program will not cost the budget anything, as we will get the money back from the increased tax return. So this has been very briefly what I wanted to mention, and of course I'm open to any questions. Again, very big thanks to UNECE team for working with us on the profile, and as I mentioned, we'll be working closely with the National Statistics Office to close the gap on all the necessary KPIs, so maybe down the road we'll revise it and have more insight into Tbilisi. Thank you very much.
Now may I invite Mr. Manave, who is the head of the Spatial and Urban Development Agency for Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, dear guests, and welcome everyone. And very special thanks to UNECE, who decided to organize this amazing conference, and especially even choosing the San Marino and talking about problems from here. It's a symbolic, because it's a small city, and as we know, small cities are in big danger. And now I will summarize briefly what we do as an agency, and then what's our approach as a national agency regarding the smart and sustainable cities. And then I would like to talk about the potential cooperation between UNECE and Georgia to further the development of the international standards and best practices within the spatial and urban planning of our country. So we were created just a few months ago as an agency, Before that, it was just a department within the Ministry of Infrastructure, and now we have much more authority, we have better funding opportunities, larger personnel, and let's say more ambitious goals to really change the pattern of spatial planning of Georgia, because less than 20% of municipalities are covered by spatial plans in our country, and we have a lot of work to do, and we really need international expertise in that. One of our primary goals is to create the national spatial plan to really understand what is the best and highest use of territories of Georgia, and also to help local municipalities create land use master plans and integrate all the issues and aspects that all the guests and delegates were talking about during the last 3 days, and also the declaration of San Marino on top of the list. Now, I would like to talk about the strategy and how we see the smart and being smart and sustainable for the cities of Georgia. We think that smart cities are not necessarily high-tech and futuristic, because we can integrate all the smart topics and technology within even small cities and with limited budgets, as QR codes for the waste management or mobility, and etc. and etc. We also think that smart cities are not necessarily expensive and without soul, because we have some examples around the world that smart cities were built from the scratch, and the result was not exactly what the people wanted to be at the end. So I think we can have small cities, medium-sized cities, and still be smart. And last, of course, it's not for only developed countries, and countries like Georgia and countries in transition and developing countries have also the possibility to integrate all the agenda of being smart and having smart cities. Regarding the sustainability, we approach the development of the land to focus on brownfield inner city developments. As you know, we have the Soviet Union past, so we have many post-industrial areas within the large cities and also small cities, and we are aiming to redevelop them instead of extending the city footprints. Because as we know, we have many examples around the world that as the city extends, within the limited budgets, it's very difficult to maintain, like the roads, utilities, and etc. And even it's making mobility very expensive for the city dwellers. Also, we would like to encourage the agglomeration. For example, around the capital city, we have a larger area. Deputy Mayor knows it much better, the details. We have 3 or 4 cities within the line around Tbilisi, and we would like to encourage the connections between the capital city and small cities in order to limit the capital city from the overcrowding and people still living in outside small settlements, but traveling and working in Tbilisi without moving to the city. So what are our goals? Our approach is that being smart as a city, the end user of cities are the visitors and citizens, right? Especially visitors and the tourists are interesting about Georgia because tourism is really skyrocketing in Georgia for the last 15 years. And to give the best possible user experience for the citizens and visitors and tourists is key. So integrating the smart solutions with technology will benefit greatly for the citizens and tourists. Efficient use of settlements resources. for the being sustainable and being smart, of course, means to use usage of the resources in an optimized way. One of the key ideas here, as also Deputy Mayor talked about, is mobility issues, because what we see, for example, metro extensions and then underground extensions are very expensive for the limited budget, like most of our regional cities have. So integrating the mixed-use development to decrease the car usage is a key idea here, and also having in mind this 15-minute approach, 15-minute city approach, which personally I love this idea, is a key as well here. And also shifting focus from cars to pedestrians is one of the key issues as well, because at this moment car is really dominating in our cities, and we would love to change it, but of course it's not easy, and we have long-term approach regarding that. And urban nature, very important, another issue. So what we see around the world, in my country, in my city, having more nature in the city means to be more resilient against the natural catastrophes, for the urban heat island effect to decrease it, and also for some different types of natural disasters. Talking about all of this, we know there are so many challenges to achieve any of the ideas what I was talking about. So one of the key issues about smart cities in Georgia is the, we call it poor big data, because one is the collection, another is what kind of quality of data you collect. So in that sense, we have a lot of work to do, especially outside the capital city and outside the big cities, because data collection is not happening in a good way, I would say, in many of our regional cities, and we are aiming to change that. Lack of expertise on the regional level, because experts are in a, I would say, real big need in Georgia, and I will talk about more on my last part. And very low awareness of being smart, because most of the people don't really understand what does it mean to be smart. As I said before, it's not necessarily to be high-tech and super expensive. You still can be smart with using so many different technology uses. Regarding sustainability, very big challenge, one of the big challenges is that social problems are funded more than sustainability works, for example, or projects, because what we see, it's top-down approach, but I think we have to have total different approach, because having more sustainable, more pedestrianized, more natural, more focused on nature cities, you have better environments, and better environments create better opportunities for the social and economic development of neighborhoods. And also, one of the key ideas that we always discuss with investors is that they always ask, show me the returns of the sustainability, because it's a bit long term, we all know it, but there is no other way, especially having in mind the latest data about the climate change. So to kind of wrap up how we as a national level government of Georgia and UNECE could cooperate. Within the spatial planning, we really need knowledge share, what is the best practice. We totally understand that there is no ready-made formulas for spatial planning, and all the ideas and rules and formulas should be applied to a certain needs and certain goals, I would say. In order also to get the best practices integrated in our spatial planning, we would like to meet several key experts from the UNECE. Actually, yesterday we had the amazing opportunity to meet with the Real Estate Advisory Group, and I thank one more time for this amazing group of people who really shared the knowledge from totally different views, and it was really helpful. Thank you one more time. Regarding the urban planning, also like the regional capacity build-up is one of key issues, because outside capital city, the situation is not good, and we would like to have some programs with international experts, international schools, international universities, and we think that everything is doable, just we need right approach and right people on the right time. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to hear any questions or comments from you.
Could I ask Madam Chair for some reflections on the comments that were made by our guests?
Thank you, Martha. It was very interesting panel, I would say, because we had very diverse views from a city-state, if I may say it, which showed the opportunities that gives a system, democratic system, but also its weaknesses and the need for more decentralization. And we heard this even in the morning, highlighted also yesterday, highlighted as an issue that needs to be stressed and focused also by our committee. Also, the views from a city manager that and challenges and opportunities that they face in developing a smart, sustainable city, and the meaning of smartness and sustainability, which not for I mean, smartness is not the excellence of technology and digitalization, but it can start from simple steps to with the aim of improving the life of citizens. And the view from national level, from the agency that is just established, but that had a program, ambitious program, for developing smart, sustainable cities. And again, it was highlighted the fact that technology is not the aim, but is a tool to reach an aim. And this is what we have been trying to also to transmit, that technology is only a tool and not the aim. So we don't aim to make citizens or cities smart, but we want to make better life for citizens, and we use technology for that. We are in a process of transition. In fact, it's, digitalization and technology is not just a trend now, it's a reality. And we have to be prepared for further developing this trend. And we have been also discussing, even informally, how this new trend is creating also problems with the labor market, because technology, high technology and digitalization needs also training and education, and we have to, perhaps it's a bit late, but we have to start and think also on education system for being able to engage and to develop the labor market for that. So thank you very much for your panel.
Thank you very much. And if I might ask one or two questions of our guest, and then of course we would like to open it to the floor.
Be minded that we have to finish by 12:30 because there is a side event.
Okay, 20 minutes will be very precise and very quick. And I just wanted to say, when you spoke of education, it sounded like we were coordinated, because at my school, i.e. School of Architecture and Design, we are just implementing a new Bachelor in Urban Studies, which tries to bring together many of these ideas of sustainability, technology, and a holistic point of view. So thank you for that. It was very interesting to me, because I heard on both sides the importance of sharing information, sharing knowledge. And it seems to me that technology can help us from bottom up and from top down. And I wondered if you could give an example of somehow this coordination. I know in the case of San Marino, you spoke of the need of strengthening the messages at municipal level between cities in San Marino. Perhaps you could talk about how you're trying to do this. And then from the point of view, the same question to Georgia and Tbilisi, how can you share knowledge, and can that be top down and also bottom up in your cities, Tbilisi, and in the country? So, Mr. Captain, if you would start.
Thank you. So in San Marino is the steps to arrive to the solution is just to ask to the government and propose to the government what is, in our opinion, and maybe often is the opinion of the citizen, because we have a real contact with all citizens. We are so small. In San Marino there are 30,000 inhabitants in all San Marino. In my city, just 4,000 inhabitants. So we can say we know everyone. Okay, and so our contest is to ask to the government to do the best choice for our citizens and our city. But now is always a part of the government that decide for us and for the city. In these years, they ask a lot of studies to solve the problem of, first of all, of water problem, because in the last years we live in the summer, we live always with the restriction water. But this is a problem a long time, and we ask every year what is the solution, what is the potential solution. But in San Marino there is also another problem, that every government think another way. And so every 5 years, when the government change, there's another way, there's another study, there's another things. And so we remain at the point of the beginning. And so this is our experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're really illustrating how both levels, top plus all the understanding of the citizens in different municipalities, is important. Could I ask our colleagues, please?
Sure. So I think the city of Tbilisi is in a bit of a unique place, because we compose about 30% of the population of Georgia, and about 40% of GDP is generated in Georgia. So we are very much dependent on the central government to implement this the big reforms, which are way beyond the city budget. But the central government, on the other hand, has the understanding that this is not just a local issue, and what Tbilisi does will most likely be replicated in smaller cities, and we share the knowledge sort of down the stream. And this has been really working. I mean, it's been like all the new projects are pioneered in the capital, and then, you know, if necessary, they are sort of passed down in the other cities. So this has been our way. So.
Also, on the national level, we try to have much more participatory planning within the urban planning, and also not spatial planning, for urban planning, to really engage citizens, to try to understand their needs, because they are the end users of the urban planning. So as also Deputy Mayor said, Tbilisi is kind of example for all the other cities, and most of the reforms that happen in Tbilisi, they are easily and kind of ready-made for the other cities, because scale is much smaller. For example, Tbilisi has 1.2 million population, and the second largest city has 0.3 million population. So kind of the formulas and reforms that happen in Tbilisi then are kind of replicated in smaller scale in other cities.
The other question I wanted to ask has to do with mobility. Very interesting, because all three speakers spoke of making cities more walkable, improving mobility, and that in turn has a great impact on carbon emissions. I can imagine you would approach it in different ways. So could you talk a little bit about mobility, more specifically? Is it possible to change mobility in San Marino, in Tbilisi, in other cities? And where do you start? And how do you change people? And I can only say, again, a very personal anecdote. I live in Madrid. Public transportation is fantastic. I don't own a car. I always take public transportation or walk due to a number of factors. So I invite you, if you would like to share in experiences, we can talk later. But please tell me what you're doing in San Marino.
So mobility in San Marino is a problem. So it's a problem because San Marino, you know, really, as you see, is a mountain, and there are the municipality is just one over there, and the most more activities is on the high street. No, you know the high street that come to Rimini from San Marino. But here, if you don't have a car, if you don't have a motorcycle, you can go anywhere. So we have a lot of public transporting, yes, but it's always empty. They go around the city with one person, two person. Just neither the young people that they don't have the mini car now, or they don't have another locomotion, so another thing to. They don't keep the public transport. There is the father or the mother or the grandfather and grandmother that bring them to the location. So I think the first of all, we have to learn to the new generation that the most important thing is our health and the health of our planet, and we have to learn them to keep this public transport, but in the other way, the public transport have to be concentrated and have to be, the real opportunity to go where one of them has to go. Yeah, really. I think so. Okay.
Thank you so much, because that appreciation that transport is not just moving people anywhere, but it's moving people where they really need to go, and encouraging hubs so that they can go to different places. What about in your case?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the transport reform mobility has been a very, very big issue in Tbilisi last couple of years. Of course, behavior change is very hard. People don't want to change anything. They want to change how they go to work or what time, etc. But if you believe that if you look at the numbers, if the data shows you're right, if your international consultants tell you you're on the right path, you have to kind of stick with it. For example, we're building the bike lanes, and of course all the opponents are saying, look, there's only a couple people a day riding these bike lanes. You know, give back this lane to the cars, and of course you have to believe that when you complete the routes, and people will use it and switch. So it's a bit of, I think, a balance of political will and you know, what you're willing to do, and as far as but you have to keep stick to it, because all the reforms that are necessary are kind of painful. So you have to realize that. Yeah.
On the national level, as a special planning agency, we are aiming for the regions and the cities to be less car dependent, as Tbilisi already implemented is being implementing the idea. And another thing is that, as I mentioned in my presentation, this 15-minute city approach and mixed-use development. For example, in one of the large cities, we are now making urban planning. It's Kpis. It's the third largest city. For example, we are not aiming to have a separate CBD or central business district, and instead we try to have more kind of multi-centric approach within the city, and for example, offices, housing, hotels, and commercial areas all together. So this is one of our approach in terms to decrease the mobility, to solve the mobility problem and decrease car dependency.
Thank you. I believe there's a question from the audience. So if someone would like to turn on the mic and ask the question, we have a little bit of time. So then to our speakers, if they would be concise and are concise in the question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got two questions for the distinguished representatives from Georgia. And first of all, thank you very much for the very impressive sharing of information. The first question concerns local governance. You mentioned in your presentation that while enforcing all those initiatives, you have as well encountered and experienced a sort of public backlash. So my first question is, how have you tackled this reaction from the public, if you have put in place some sort of mechanism or participatory process to make sure that there was a bigger level of acceptance on behalf of the citizens? And the second question concerns tourism. You have as well mentioned that, and we're all aware of the fact that there's an increased level of tourism development at national level and in some of your cities, and in Tbilisi, of course. And my question is, have you thought of any strategy or plan to address sustainable tourism, due to the fact that tourism as a sector may exert some pressures and impacts on the ecosystem of the cities as well? Thank you very much.
Regarding what you said, of course, most of the public backlash also comes on the basis of false information. So we try to provide real data, real information, because people, you know, and it's very, for me, it's very sad, because it's usually some very public people that make the statements, like some celebrities that are stuck in traffic, and then they make this TikTok, and you have this huge, you know, issue, and you actually have to answer to this TikTok at the end of the day, and it's a bit sad, but you have to do it. You know, you have to get you have to get the real data out, and you have to show the people. And the mayor does this very regularly by, you know, really opening up the data, saying, look, if we add, I don't know, people are saying, we'd add 5 buses on this line and the problem will be solved. We're saying, look, the existing 4 buses are not able to, you know, complete the circle and get the passengers out. Adding more buses will not solve this issue. So, you know, things like this. So getting the real information out. We use social networks a lot. We have our experts, consultants go to TV shows and try to explain things to the public. So I guess information, I think, has been the biggest weapon. And regarding tourism, I'll quickly answer that so far, the strategy of Georgia and Tbilisi has been really to attract more and more tourism, but now we're getting to this point that we've had already 3 times the amount of tourists, the population of the country. So sustainability has been very big issue already this year, especially with COVID coming. So we really need to revise, I think, the national strategy, which is focused mainly on attracting tourism, and it's really lacking on sustainability. So I think this is the really good time to implement this into the strategy.
Could I ask Mr. Rossini if you would want to make a comment about sustainable tourism? I know the question wasn't there, but it seems similar in a way, a concern in Georgia, and you mentioned it was a concern here. So could you talk just very briefly, sustainable tourism and the challenges for San Marino to end the discussion this morning?
Okay, thank you. So yes, for San Marino, the tourism is the most is really, really important because we live upon the tourism. And now we have a project with the other municipality, our neighbor municipality. We line a 50-kilometer municipality around us, and we are making a project that this became one territory of tourism. And so we promote, yes, the tourism of the ancient city, but also art tourism and natural and outdoor tourism. Because in this area we have everything for the tourism. We have the sea, we have the mountain, we have the city of art, we have everything. And so this is the project that San Marino is going on with the other municipality.
Thank you so much. And I think we will end the morning session now because I know there are many other things to come. Madam Chair, do you have any final comments and encouragement for the next sessions?
Well, I would like again to thank all the panelists and also for the audience for the questions. And please don't worry, we will have the second session that we will continue discussing on the smart sustainable cities. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone.
And before leaving, just to remind you that there is a side event that starts at 12:30, that's why we were a bit in a hurry, which is UNECE FAO Impulse Lab, Trees, Nature's Technology for Climate-Proof Building. And it will be here in this in the same location. Thank you.
People have now 5-10 minutes to